Hey everybody, thanks for being here. I'm going to give you a quick introduction today about the nervous system, the different things that are inside of it, what it does, and how they work together. This is just going to be an introduction. We're going to learn much more about it, but hopefully this is clear enough and can get you to understand some of these basic concepts. So to start off, what's the nervous system all about? Its overall function is to sense stimuli, whether it's from your internal environment inside your body or the external environment, everything around you. It's then got to decide and process and decide how to respond to that stimulus or those stimuli. And then it's got to send out a response so that your body responds correctly, whether it's to run away, whether it's to take your hand away from something, or whether it's to change your blood pressure. The nervous system is made of two general types of cells: neurons, the ones that send the signals, and neuroglia, the ones that support the neurons in any way they need. The nervous system can be broken into two parts when you think about its structure. There's the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord, and then there are the peripheral nerves, all of the nerves that are outside of the brain and spinal cord that are still sending and receiving messages. The peripheral nervous system can be broken up in a couple of ways. There's afferent versus efferent. Afferent is the part of the peripheral nervous system that is taking in signals and sending them into the central nervous system. The efferent portion is what is sending signals out, going from the brain and spinal cord to a muscle or a gland, something that needs to respond to a stimulus. There's also the somatic and the autonomic nervous system. Somatic is everything you have control over, like your muscles. Autonomic is everything you do not have control over, and those would be the smooth muscle of your intestines, your heart, your breathing muscles to some degree, or any glands that respond to nerve impulses to produce hormones or other secretions. Neurons can vary widely in their shape. This is a general shape that we will use to discuss the parts that all neurons have. Neurons have a cell body, and that's where all of the cellular machinery that you typically think of is enclosed. Things like the nucleus, things like the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus, their mitochondria. There are dendrites, and what dendrites do is they receive signals from other neurons. Those signals are in the form of chemicals called neurotransmitters, and so dendrites respond to neurotransmitters that have been released from other neurons, and then they would bring that signal into the cell body where it would go out the axon. The axon is where the signal is sent out of a neuron. At the end of the axon, it would release neurotransmitters, which would trigger other neurons. At the base of the axon is an axon hillock. It has microtubules there, which help keep its shape and allow things to be transported down the axon. Many axons have a coating around them of a substance called myelin. It's a mixture of protein, but mostly lipid. And what that does is it insulates the axon, and so the electric signal that travels down the axon can travel more quickly and doesn't cross paths with other axons that might be nearby. It's this myelin that is destroyed, that is attacked by the nervous system when someone is diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The gaps in the myelin are called nodes of Ranvier, and the electric signal, to move quicker, instead of moving down the entire axon, skips between those nodes, and that's why it moves more quickly when the axon is covered with myelin. The three general shapes of axons are multipolar, bipolar, and unipolar. Multipolar means that there are many things extending off of the cell body. They have many dendrites and one axon. Bipolar have two things extending from the cell body. The dendrites, which are coming from a large branch, enter one side, and out the other side is an axon. Unipolar have only one extension from the cell body, and it extends into really just one large axon. There are dendrites at the very beginning, but then the signal goes right from those dendrites, not going through the cell body, but going right down to the end of the axon. Neurons can also be classified by their function. Sensory neurons carry electrical signals to the central nervous system about the environment. Some sensory neurons have receptors on them, and they can be triggered directly by an environmental stimulus. Some need to be associated or connected to specialized receptor cells, which would take a stimulus and turn it into an electric signal, which the sensory neuron would then carry to the central nervous system. Interneurons are the ones that decide what to do with that stimulus, how to respond to it. And those are in the brain and spinal cord, and they process the signals and are responsible for your thoughts. Motor neurons carry signals to the peripheral nervous system to effectors. Effectors are things that can cause some change, some response. So those would be your muscles or glands or something that your nervous system tells to act in response to the stimulus. As stated earlier, aside from neurons, the other types of cells in the nervous tissue are neuroglial cells, sometimes just called glia or just sometimes called glial cells. There are 6 types of those. 4 of them are in the brain and spinal cord, and 2 of them are in the peripheral nerves. In the central nervous system, in the brain and spinal cord, you'll find microglia, which act as immune cells. They're very similar in structure to macrophages, and they eat up bacteria or cellular debris from broken down, old, worn out cells. Oligodendrocytes create the myelin that insulates the axons of the neurons in the central nervous system. Astrocytes are involved in nourishing the neurons, making sure that they have their nutrients and a correct ion balance. Ependymal cells form the lining of the cavities that exist, or the holes that exist in the brain and spinal cord, and they produce cerebrospinal fluid. In the peripheral nervous system, there are Schwann cells, which are the things that cover the axons and insulate the axons in the peripheral nervous system. And then there are satellite cells, which surround and protect the cell bodies of the unipolar neurons. The last thing I wanted to mention today is something about gliomas. You see, when neurons mature and they become neurons, they need to specialize and rearrange themselves, and their centrioles end up getting used up, a structure that supports their axon, and so they lose the ability, since centrioles originally in a general cell help them divide, they lose that ability to divide and copy themselves, and so neurons don't typically copy themselves because of that. Cancer is when cells copy themselves uncontrollably, and so it's very unlikely that a neuron would form a cancer. What does happen, though, is the glial cells do not lose their ability to reproduce, and they can copy themselves in an uncontrolled way, and that's what a glioma is. It's a glial cell that has lost its ability to stop growing, to stop copying itself, and forms a tumor. Well, thanks for following along. I hope that was all clear enough. You may still have a lot of questions. This was a very brief introduction. Hopefully your questions will be answered throughout the course, but of course feel free to ask your instructor any wonderings you're having. I'll see you next time.